Let's look at one last little movie on imperfect. Okay, we've talked about past tense in Spanish is imperfect. You only use preterite if you want to stress it happened one time and one time only. On June 15th, I fell down a well. On September 3rd, she slipped and broke her leg. Preterite means one time. And if it's preterite, one time it ends in one letter. Remember the chant? If it ends with an E, it was done by me. If it ends in an O, it was done by Joe. But what about actions that were done over and over and over? Mr. Hall always told silly jokes. He always wore silly ties. Bill always came to school late. Those are imperfect, okay? Now, past tense is primarily imperfect. You generally use imperfect. So if you're not sure, do I use preterite, one time, or imperfect? Always guess imperfect. How am I going to remember this? Think about this chant. Fred Flintstone was coming through the door. Fred Flintstone was coming through the door. Just visualize a Fred Flintstone mannequin or Fred Flintstone walking through the door of the Spanish class. All right? Number one, when did Fred live? He lived in the past. Imperfect is past tense. Okay? His wife, Wilma, thought that Fred was imperfect. She didn't think he was a perfect husband. She thought he was imperfect. So, imperfect, Abba, Abbas, Abba, Ia, Ias, Ia. Fred said yabba dabba do. So what does AR turn into in the imperfect? Abba, Abbas, Abba, Abamos, Abba. Fred didn't say yabba dabba do once. He said yabba dabba do over and over and over again. But Mr. Holt, you said Fred Flintstone coming through the door. I get that Fred lived in the past. I get that he was imperfect and said yabba dabba do. But what's up with the coming through the door business? Well, let's look. Door is D-O-R. I know it's actually D-O-O-R, but we're going to go D-O-R. D stands for description. Folks, if you're describing anything, you use the imperfect. Let me say that again. If you're describing anything, you use the imperfect. If you're saying it was June 3rd, era el 3 de junio. It was 4 o'clock. Eran las 4. It was hot. Hacía calor. She was happy. Estaba contenta. Anytime you're describing date, time, weather, feelings, it's always imperfect. Abba, ia. Job, family, ownership, age. Maria tenía 15 años. Maria was 15 years old. So, door, D-O-R. If you're describing, you're going to use imperfect. O stands for ongoing, ing. She was dancing. We were eating. They were talking. Anytime it's a past tense sentence with ing, it's going to be imperfect. Abba, abbas, abba, ia, ias, ia. What does R stand for? Repeated. R stands for repeated. Yo estudiaba. I always studied. Él bailaba bien. He always danced well. Ella me visitaba. She always visited me. All right, so again, think about Fred Flintstone coming through the door. Fred Flintstone coming through the door. Fred lived in the past. Okay? His wife Wilma thought he was imperfect, and he said yabba dabba do. He walked through the door. What does D stand for? Describing. If you're describing date, time, weather, anything else, use the imperfect. Abba ia. What does O of door stand for? Ongoing. ing. She was eating. We were talking. Anytime it's past tense, ing, it's imperfect. Abba ia. And what does R on door stand for? Repeated. I repeatedly sang songs. We repeatedly fought. She repeatedly ate bologna sandwiches. So, in closing, when do we ever use preterite? That other one. For an action that happened one time. Yesterday, he ate a taco for lunch, one time. On Saturday, I went to the store, one time. You also use preterite. If it ends with an E, it was done by me. If it ends in an O, it was done by Joe. For something that had a clear start and stop, like they lived here for 15 years, or she stayed in her room for several minutes. And that's it.